Hello, welcome to another video. Welcome to another reading vlog. I am going to spend some time the next couple of days, just do a full 24-hour readathon. I've never done something like this. I actually don't tend to spend a lot of time or long stretches of time simply reading. I'm usually doing little bits and spurts throughout the day, throughout the week. And the past couple, week and a half, I've been kind of backburnering reading. I am just ready to relax for a day or two. I also looked at the weather and it's getting pretty cloudy and gloomy out. I'm just gonna lean in and pick up some books. Kicking this off, we're reading If Not Winter, Fragments of Sappho by Carson. The poetry is written by Sappho, an ancient Greek poet and lyricist. I don't know if that's the technical term, but a lot of the poetry is lyrics that were meant to be sung, usually with a choir. And the reason I know that is because there's these handy reference notes in the back of the book that were written by Carson. She gives a lot of context to the poetry, both as a whole and the individual poems and where they're being cited from, where they're being pulled from, and any additional context about the people that are mentioned. It's really, really helpful. So it's making it a pretty enjoyable reading experience. Also, basically there's a lot of poems where it's just like a couple words per page, and we have the English on the right-hand page and the original Greek on the left-hand page. So you're really only reading every other page. I do like to try to look at the Greek version just to see some of the stylistic differences, and it's also so beautiful. So I'm going to continue reading this. Then I'll let you know when we pick up our next book. But for now, If Not Winter, gonna settle in. Okay, first check-in. I've been reading for about 45 minutes. I finished If Not Winter. I really liked this. It's really beautiful. I like seeing the wordplay that Sappho used and how the translator chose to translate certain things. And even in the notes, she talks about alternate translations for certain words and some further meaning of the text. And it's just so fascinating. This was a delight. I also really loved the pages and the floppiness of this book. I feel like I have a slight bit more appreciation for poetry, something that I don't often read or enjoy. This was a nice change of pace. I liked all of the Greek gods and the Greek myths that tied in as well, so that was fun. If you like poetry or you like Greek myths, I would recommend giving it a shot. And then I picked up A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky. I don't know how many books there's going to be in this series, but this is the second of the only two that are out. I actually don't know if there's any more that are being planned or not. So for all I know, this is the last book in the series. I was obsessed with the first book. It's called A Psalm for the Wild Built. It introduced me to the idea of solar punk, which is like ecologically friendly, utopian future society. It just was like such an optimistic view of what a potential future could look like, even as unrealistic as it is. I just appreciated the hopefulness to it. This is technically a sci-fi, but I would say it's like sci-fi light. They're very easy, quick reads. Not a lot of characters, at least in the first book. There was really only two characters that you're following, a monk and a robot, which is the name of the series, A Monk and Robot. I found the first one absolutely delightful, and I've been saving this second book for a while. I think it's about time that I finally get to it. I needed to let the hype of the first one die down for me. I didn't want to go into the second one with too many expectations because the first one just made me feel so many things. And I think it was particularly poignant for me at that time. I don't know, maybe this one will hit the spot again, but maybe not. I am going to pop outside for a quick walk before it gets completely dark out. I do have the audio for A Prayer for the Crown Shy, so I will be able to continue my reading and just get a little bit of fresh air for the day.
Macmillan Audio presents A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, read by Emmett Grossland. For anybody who doesn't know where they're going.
Good morning. I am very much still half asleep, so this might be a bit rambly, but last night I read for a total of 4.5 hours. I finished A Prayer for the Crown Shy. I feel like mostly I'm glad that I got it off my TBR since it's been on there for so long. It was pleasant. It was not as mind-blowing for me as the first one. A little less impactful, but it was still really pleasant. It's very character-driven, very low stakes. You really have to like the characters. I personally really love Mosscap, the robot, and I also think Dex, the monk, is also quite relatable sometimes as well. The pairing of them is really endearing. It's a lot of dialogue that is around philosophy and ethics, and I found that pretty interesting. If there's one critique I had, I would say maybe specifically with Dex, they're a very casual tone, and it sounds like they would exist today. So it's very modern day language, even though it's meant to be set very far in the future. So I found that took me out a little bit. I'm caught up with the series. I don't know if there's going to be any more, but I think it honestly doesn't need it. The first one was the best. This one is a nice little ending. Also, for the record, if you're going to have a cozy fantasy, cozy sci-fi, whatever, I think this is the perfect length. There's no need to be any longer than this. Next up, I am deciding between Life Ceremony by Sayaka Murata, which is short stories, or Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, aka Blade Runner, since I'm kind of on a sci-fi roll. I think I'm going to taste test each of them and decide from there. Okay, I've got a bean with me, and I figured I'd check in because it is now about 2 o'clock, so it's been a few hours. I think I've been reading for a total of 8.5 hours. That's another 4 hours today, and on top of what I did last night. I really thought I would be able to fit in more reading. I'm like shocked that I've only technically been reading for like 4 hours. Been listening mostly to the audio for Life Ceremony. So this is short stories. It's translated from Japanese. It's kind of like speculative fiction where it's like basically our world, but there's some type of social norm that is just different from ours. And I think that's the central theme of her writing, subverting your expectations on what's normal. I'm in the second to last story right now. So far, the strongest one has been the first story, which is first grade material. It introduces the idea of people's bodies being turned into materials for wearing or use of some sort, like furniture or jewelry with various parts of the human body. It's interesting because the writing style is very simple, straightforward, but then they're talking about these concepts that just are jarring, very, very bizarre. It just kind of feels like it continues to up the weirdness with each interpretation of what the human body could be made into. Also, Life Ceremony is probably like one of the longer ones in this. I think that one was also really interesting to read. It, again, is taking the human body after death, and in this version of reality, the narrator is conflicted about what's normal. So there's a lot of conversation around what's normal and why it's considered normal and how that's always changing. So that was an interesting story, and I think the ending was really actually kind of beautifully done. Everything else has just been a little bit odd. I'm not sure if I'm really like picking up on the messaging or the ideas that the author's trying to convey. There's just a lot of things that are just off-putting in some form or another. I think there was one story that talked about food as a symbol of culture and how it's used to convey culture, and it's so tied in with culture and where somebody comes from. That one was a little bit interesting as well. That being said, I do feel like I'm losing steam rapidly. I have been listening and working on my thumbnail. I did some mending on my bed sheets, but listening and trying to think critically about the stories for hours on end is a little bit more draining than I expected. Actually, it's about as draining as I expected. I guess I was hopeful that it would feel more natural, like the more time you spend doing it. Anyways, I'm tired. And this challenge is it's hard. I should be finishing Life Ceremony before my 24 hours is up. I've got about 3.5 hours left, and I have to think about what I'm going to start because I am only going to have like an hour and a half left. So I don't know what I want to start next. Maybe a romance. I usually kind of alternate between fantasy and romance. I'm a little bit overdue for a romance read. I just want something fun after plowing through like all the Sayaka Murata stories, which are fun in their own way, but different. They're definitely not as fun as romance, I'll say that.
Perhaps even abandoned, and flea grew there in profusion. Just thinking about it made me feel hungry, and I naturally started walking faster. This concludes the reading of Life Ceremony, Stories by Sayaka Murata, translated by Ginny Topley Takamori. Copyright 2019 by Sayaka Murata.
It's currently 3:30. I have a couple of hours left of this 24-hour readathon, and I finished Life Ceremony. So I will add one more short story to the favorites list, and that was the last one called Hatchling. The main character in this deals with basically changing personas with every social circle she moved in, whether it was in school or her workplace. She basically had varying personas throughout her lifetime, always in response to the people around her. Basically, whatever kind of character they assigned to her was how she responded, and she just became more and more like that version of the character that people projected onto her. I found this actually very relatable. I think we all do this, but I liked the way it was approached with like kind of this extreme version of it, where she had these nicknames and just the personas were so vastly different from each other in some ways. So that was kind of entertaining. And also she was planning a wedding with her fiance, which I'm also planning a wedding with my fiance, and she mentions how once she decides who she's going to be for that wedding, she will be able to decide the decor and the style and the dress, and it depends on which persona she wants to be. I hadn't really thought of it in that regard, but you know what? Like that's pretty spot on. How do you even start to narrow down who you're going to be on that day? I thought that was really entertaining and just an interesting way of exploring that topic. And that's book 3 of this readathon done. I have 2 hours left. While listening to the audio, I finished uploading my YouTube video and doing some mending. I was able to stay pretty productive, but I feel like I've just been consuming words all day. So I think I'm gonna basically pause and do a little bit of a workout and maybe extend this like a couple hours later into the evening. I'm probably just gonna continue reading throughout the evening, and I do have my next book lined up. It's going to be an ebook called A Perfect Vintage by Chelsea Fagan. This is a romance book. I'm not sure how rom-com-y it is versus like women's fiction. I think it leans a little more women's fiction. I'd gotten the arc of it right before it came out, and I didn't have a chance to finish it before it was archived on NetGalley, so I got to read about the first 60 pages, I think, and I was really liking it. I'm going to pretty much pick up where I left off because I do remember pretty much the whole setup from when I read it the first time, shockingly. So I think I'm just going to pick up where I left off and see how many more pages of that I can read by the end of the day. And then I'll do a little bit of a roundup at the end to calculate all the pages I've read and share my final thought from this experience. And of course, I'm not being super strict. Like, there's people that do these and stay up really late and get up really early and or try to like literally stay up through the entire night, which is crazy. Like, why? So I went to bed at my normal time and woke up at my normal time, and I also took little breaks here and there. I think people forget that books are also content, and maybe it's not screen time, but it is still consumption. But for now, I'm going to have a snack, do a workout. Yeah, and then I'm going to pick up A Perfect Vintage, and hopefully I can make a good dent in that by the end of the day.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme au Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère.
All right, hello, welcome to the end of the video. I'm coming to you from another gloomy cloudy day. But I wanted to just quickly wrap up the books that I read as well as the 24-hour readathon experience as a whole. The book that inspired this video, If Not Winter, Fragments of Sappho by Carson. I read about 150 pages for this video and it was quite delightful. Really interesting, really enjoyable reading experience. One thing I'll add that I didn't mention before is that I think if you really like grammar and language, this might be right up your alley. And then this one's about 156 pages, if I recall. It is the sequel for Psalm for the Wild Built, which I don't think it quite lived up to. I would still really recommend the first one because of all the reasons I mentioned before. It's really hopeful and optimistic, and honestly, it felt like a kind of like a breath of fresh air when I read it. The second book here started to feel a little bit repetitive. Didn't really add a whole lot in terms of story or character or theme. The first one really stands on its own. Both books do make for pretty good palate cleansers if you're looking for something light in between some heavier reads, for sure. I did look into it and saw that the author is leaving it open-ended to continue the series. However, she is prioritizing other projects for the past few years, other series. And then Life Ceremony by Sayaka Murata. This is about 250 pages. I think this was really unique, and it definitely falls into the weird girl lit category if that's in your wheelhouse. For me, I definitely do gravitate towards that genre. I know it can be really hit or miss, but I think it's worth checking out these kind of like weird lit books because they just offer something so different and so unique that you don't necessarily get from typical genre fiction. I did appreciate the stories. The ones that really stuck out to me did get me thinking and got me considering kind of what is normal and how we approach and engage with ideas that we consider abnormal. So that was interesting. And to cap off, I reread the first 51 pages of A Perfect Vintage by Chelsea Fagan. I had mentioned that I wanted to just pick up where I left off previously, but since it's been so long, I decided to actually go back to the beginning, just refresh my memory on some of the character development that takes place in those first few chapters. So far, I'm just really enjoying the setting. It is taking place at a chateau in the Loire Valley of France, which is just really pleasing to the Francophile in me, and the writing style in general is pretty solid. All right, and in terms of the 24-hour readathon as a whole, let's talk pros and cons. Really, the main only con is that my attention span simply cannot handle this. I need way more variety throughout the day. To me, it just got a little bit repetitive and at times felt a little bit forced. So maybe that's just me. In terms of pros, I did like the simplicity of just prioritizing one activity, kind of took the decision making out of it. That was kind of nice. The other pro is that I read 609 pages total over the course of a day and a half. So that's also pretty cool. I'm glad I gave it a shot because I think going forward, I do want to make a point to have intentional reading sessions, not 24 hours, but I would think maybe I could try like a 6-hour readathon. I like the idea of just grabbing a couple beverages and some snacks and getting comfy, setting some ambiance, reading for a solid chunk of time, especially if I have a good book that I really want to get immersed in, like a good high fantasy book. Sounds really quite nice. The last note I want to make is if you are somebody who watches a lot of BookTube and Book Talk and you're seeing these 24-hour challenges, please get sleep. I know a lot of people that do this tend to try to skip sleep. I mean, you do you, but like sleep is just so important for your brain and body. And like if the book is really good, you're gonna enjoy it most likely even more when your brain is functioning at full capacity. But with that, thank you so much for watching. If you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments. Leave me a clock emoji in the comments if you made it this far. You're amazing. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in another video quite soon.